So in the meantime, we opened up the root system. As you can tell, I did a substantial opening of the root system to make sure that I'm guiding those bigger roots out, and that's going to be the anchoring system for the tree. So roots have multiple purposes. Not only is it to take up water and nutrients from the soil, but one of its other primary responsibilities is to support the tree. So you want to make sure that you always have a good, strong, healthy root system. Anything on the top of the ground that you see is all thanks to what's going on underneath the ground. So just make sure that you start off with the right size hole, the right amount of water, good food in the hole, and a good solid root system. So basically we've dug our hole, and as you can tell, it's a nice big hole. It's not just the size of this root ball. It's going to allow me to place those roots out and fan them out so that I guide them in the right direction. You know, I found old tree roots and things like that in there. It's really not a biggie. You don't have to clear them all out. You just have to be able to get your tree to grow around those roots. This was an old maple tree that was planted over there, so that's what we're finding now. But you can see that maple tree, I believe, was taken out probably 15 years ago, and there's still roots decaying in the soil. It takes a long time for the old roots to actually break down completely. So know that if you are trying to plant a tree in the exact same location as another tree, it's next to impossible. You have to move it over several feet because you're dealing with a really substantial root system. As much as we want to, it just doesn't work. So now what we've done, we're at McDougall Park, we don't have ready access to a hose and a faucet. So what we have are several buckets of water. I've already dumped several buckets of water into my hole. This is the most important part of when you plant a tree. The reason it's important is that you want to fill the hole up with water, and you want to see how quickly the water drains. Now, we haven't had any rain for weeks now on end, so the soil is extremely dry, as you can see. Ultimately, what you want to do is fill the hole up with water all the way to the top and watch it drain. And what that's going to do is, first of all, it's going to percolate all the way into the surrounding area. So your tree, once it gets in there, it's going to have moisture for a long time in all the surrounding areas. And then you're going to be able to get a really good idea how quickly that water drains. So if the water drains really slowly, you know that you're going to have to be concerned about roots rotting because the water is going to be sitting too long. If it drains at a steady pace, then you're looking at, you know, it's going to have a healthy, good drainage system, and the tree's going to grow well. So like, I know I've been asked to plant trees in people's backyards in the newer developments where the soil is super compacted, and we've dug a hole, we filled it up with water, and it didn't drain even by the next day. And the client at the time, they really wanted to have a spruce planted in that location, and I told them it wouldn't work because there was no drainage in that location. It was too compacted, no matter how big of a hole we dug. So what happened was they were adamant about planting the spruce. We did, but the tree did die because the water was sitting in there. So what you have then is an anaerobic environment for the tree roots. They can't get enough oxygen, and tree roots need oxygen the same way as the top needs oxygen. So keep that in mind. You want to know how quickly your tree, the soil drains, the water drains from your soil, and that's going to guide you throughout the rest of the season in how you're going to water your tree. Biggest question people ask us is, how often do we water a tree? It's all based on this. So if the water moves freely in the soil, then you're going to be watering it on a regular basis. First couple of weeks, at least, I would say every 2 days, first couple of weeks. And then after that, you should be able to switch over to once a week. The best way to water a tree is to put the hose right next to the tree and let it trickle for close to an hour, okay? So get a full saturation of the entire area. When you let water trickle into the soil, it's going to permeate the entire area, and that's going to allow that tree to get water from everywhere else. If you're planting a tree right next to another big tree, then you have concerns about the other tree taking water away. It's going to end up wicking all the moisture away from the new one that you've just dug. So look at your surrounding area, look at how dry the soil is, how much rain we're getting, what the heat is like, because there's a lot more transpiration, evaporation from the leaves when it's really hot. So all these factors play into it. So there's no perfect secret recipe of how often to water a tree. You water a tree when it needs it. Your finger is your guide. You stick your finger in the soil. If it's wet, the soil sticks to your finger. If it's not wet, you need to water your tree. And you can also take a look at the leaves, and if they're really, really wilted, there's a good chance that it needs water. But keep in mind that your tree will look the same if it's overwater or underwater. So the key is stick your finger in the ground. So now what I'm going to do is, so one thing we always do, we use the existing soil. I know some people think that replacing all the soil in the hole is going to be a better start for the tree. The problem is when you do that, it's like, yeah, it's a great start for the tree, but your tree is going to hit the outer walls of the hole, and it's going to act exactly like it did in that plastic pot. It's going to see it as a clay pot, and it's going to start wrapping its roots around again. It's not going to bother going out into the real world. And you have to get that tree used to the tougher soil in the environment that it's growing in, so that you get a tougher root system instead of this nice little baby root system that has been, you know, has had an easy life. It's kind of like feeding your kids cheese, I think. If you feed them cheese, they'll never move out of the house. So you got to make it a little tough on them sometimes. So this is the soil that came out of the hole. You know, it's funny, we always thought Russell was solid clay, but if you look at the soil that just came out of this hole, it's very, very sandy in this location. And this park has been here for many years, so it's interesting to see. It really depends on where it's located. So we always add a bag of compost to the soil. We use this Biofor, it's like a peat compost, and it's great at wrapping itself around the clay that you do have in your soil and breaking it up so it makes the nutrients available to your tree. So it's an excellent amendment for trees. Even though we don't have clay here, it's still an excellent amendment. If you don't have the Biofor, you can use compost from your compost bin. There's many options. So I'm just gonna throw the bag of compost on top there, because as I shovel it in, it's all gonna blend in together. I don't need to get too fussy about it. And I'm gonna take my tree and pop it in the hole, and I'm gonna figure out what side I want to be most visible. And for me, I think, Erin, what's your thought? You tell me when. It's always nice to have somebody else helping you out.
Where do you want to see it?
Oh, you want me to? Everywhere. All directions. It's got to be perfect in every direction. I make her life difficult sometimes.
Erin loves being on camera. Loved it.
A little bit more. This way? Other way. Other way. Other way. But she's got the easy job. She's just doing this, and I'm the one that has to move it, so I'm working hard here.
A little more.
A little bit more, she says.
Yeah.
Is this good? Is this just right?
Yeah.
So now that I've twisted that tree concept, I gotta open up my root system again. So I'm opening it up, I'm making sure that I'm laying it out in the right direction, and everything is going out in the correct direction. So now you can see, if this is my ground level, and this is the trunk flare, it's sitting at the right height. I'm not worried about, I never want it to sink too deep. I want it to sit proud, somewhat proud. And I forgot about the mic. Mycorrhizae. Mike is just a brand name. Mycorrhizae is a fungus that is naturally occurring in the soil. And what happens in new gardens, you have new soil, and mycorrhizae lives off of the plant material in your soil. So if you've just created a new garden bed, you do not have any mycorrhizae left in that soil, because it's not inert, but it doesn't have any of this fungus. This fungus, what it does is it attaches itself to the root system of your tree, and it increases the surface area by which the tree can uptake water and nutrients. So it's an excellent amendment. I'm not a big proponent of adding bone meal to the soil. It does not hurt. But through studies, they've shown that bone meal, basically it's phosphorus. You have to add it at the time of planting if you're going to add it, but there's been a lot of studies proving that we have tons of phosphorus in our soil, that we don't need to add more while planting. So I'm a believer in adding compost when I plant, as well as the mycorrhizae. But the mycorrhizae, the only way it works is by touching the root system. It has to be in direct contact with the root system when you plant. And so there's a recipe for how much you put per tree, depending on the size of the pot and the height of the tree and all that, so that we help you calculate when you come to the store. So basically what I do is I just take the mic and I just pat it along and I make sure that I've got it connected to all my roots. And it does make a difference. I've had instances where I've had to dig a plant up after planting it 2 weeks, and the amount of root hairs that are present after a very short period of time is pretty incredible. So I am a firm believer in it, and I do use it at home. So this one I actually put way too much, but it's not going to hurt it that it's there. But this is just to show you how exactly you're supposed to place this. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to backfill it about 2/3 of the way. My little handy dandy helper Erin is going to help me out. And you can see as you backfill it, you know, I've got clods of grass in there, and that's fine. I'm just going to break it up. That'll break down over the years. And it's a good time now to make sure that we're sitting straight. So that's enough soil back in there now. What I'd like to do is, now I'm gonna add a lot more water. And the reason I'm adding all the water now is because I want the soil to suction up against the root system. And as soon as that soil suctions up against the root system, the tree can start feeding off of it immediately. Also going to make sure that the entire area is saturated. You'd be amazed when you think you've watered enough, and when you actually take the, I think we're good with that. And it's when you stick your finger in the ground, you realize there's all these air pockets. So what I'm trying to do right now is get rid of the air pockets. It's also a great time to set it up so that it's sitting straight. And this is where you have to stand back and look. There's no magic answer about, or I guess if you want to take a level out, you could. I know some engineers that might do that. They'd like to make sure that everything is perfectly lined up. And there's nothing wrong with that either. A little bit more that way. C'est bon, c'est bon? All right, so you can see this water is moving nicely in the soil, which is great. That means I have good drainage in this area. I'm also making sure that I'm saturating the entire area. So what we'll do is we're gonna wait for this to drain, and then after that I'm gonna backfill with the rest of the soil. Once the soil is backfilled, then I'll top it up with water again. But you see how much water I'm giving this tree when I'm planting it right off the bat. So there's no need to water this tree tomorrow. It will not need it because there's no way that all of this is going to evaporate overnight. So that's why I'm saying every couple of days. And you want to make sure that you're saturating it to this degree. You want the entire area moist for that tree to be able to survive. So it's going down, it's going down, it's going down nicely. So this is really what good drainage looks like. It's percolating down nicely. It's not sitting flat. It's not sitting all punky. And also, as you can tell, it's like I haven't stomped on this. I remember when I was a kid, you know, you had to stomp on the trees and to make sure they were backfilled properly. The water is taking care of that. It's washing everything and suctioning everything into place. So now that this is all drained, which that's fantastic drainage, now we can backfill with the rest of the soil and definitely add in the compost. Because that's the good stuff. So if you're in a situation where the water is just going to run off, try to make yourself a little trench around it to catch that water at the drip line so that you don't end up having it all running out of the garden. That's cool. That's where a branch was coming out of. So here I don't necessarily need the clods of sod. I'm just going to use the soil. You know, when you're planting a tree, give yourself an hour. You need a full hour to do it properly, and that's to take the time to make sure that the hole is watered properly. Do you mind making a trench on that side there? Oh, thanks, Carol. It's so much easier with the hose than having
We don't have one.
We don't have a hose today.
Here.
But that's okay. It's a good day for a walk.
It's nice and cool. Yes.
Yeah, and
Okay.
this 40-degree heat, it's really awesome. Now today is a really hot day. It is. I would never choose to plant a tree on a day this hot, but I know tomorrow it's going to cool down. So that's the reason we're doing it at 4 or 5 o'clock this afternoon, is to make sure that, you know, it gets planted. It has enough time to get its root system established before winter hits. The Cercis is definitely a borderline hardy tree, so the earlier it's in, the better it is for it. So getting to borderline hardy trees, if you are planting a borderline hardy tree, get it in as early as you can. And if it gets to be too late, sink the entire tree into the ground. Just dig a hole, put the tree in the ground, and transplant it come spring, and disturb the root system early in the spring, and then it has the entire season to get established. I have no concerns about this one because I know where I'm located. Like, McDougall Park is just a magical space where everything grows. But the other thing to keep in mind with borderline trees, borderline hardy trees, and any fast-growing tree, any soft wood, you want to protect that bark system, okay, in the wintertime. So I'd recommend that you wrap it with burlap, or you wrap it with the white coil, or you need to protect it in the wintertime. And you're protecting it from the sun coming in and bouncing off of the snow and heating up usually it's the southwest side of the tree. And what happens is that the sap starts flowing on the inside, and when it goes down to -25 at night, those cells pop because they freeze, and that's when you start seeing sun scald, which is the bark splitting. It's not always apparent the first year right after, but it definitely shows up down the road, and it's a big gaping wound that you really can't do much of anything about after the fact. So wrap it for the first few years until it's developed a nice, good, solid layer of bark to protect it from that sun scald, from the heating up of the sun in the wintertime. So we will definitely be wrapping this guy this winter. We had planted a tree in McDougall Park years ago, a London plane tree, and we hadn't wrapped it, and that's exactly what happened, and ended up dying, which is unfortunate, because that's one tree that could have made it here. And then the other thing that we're going to do is we'll put a layer of mulch down. Actually don't have a bag of mulch with me, but we do recommend that when you buy a tree, get a bag of mulch and put the layer of mulch around the tree, making sure that you do not go directly up to the trunk. You want to make sure that you're sitting, you know, you can basically do it like that, so that you're staying away, because I don't want to have anything right up against the trunk. And so bag of mulch and staking kit if you need it. It's good for trees to sway in the wind. If you do stake, there's a couple of options. You can stake with 3 stakes, and then after that, basically have it about 1/3 of the way up the trunk, basically like a teepee. And so I would put a stake out here and another one there and there, and then I would basically take, I really like the Velcro system myself. It's a cheap and easy way to not hurt your tree. So this stuff is great. It's a Velcro tape, and if your stake has a little notch in it, which you can do, you just crazy-8 it. So let me get this going here. I'm going to put it around the tree, the soft side onto the tree, and then I'm going to take it around pretty much to where it needs to go, and then I figure-8 it so it's not going to move, and then I put my stake in this way, and I do it on an angle. So once you get all 3 of them going, you're going to be able to stake that tree and it's not going to move anywhere. It doesn't look pretty, but it works. And it's a very, very effective way to stake your tree and not hurt your tree, because this Velcro stuff never, ever breaks off. So basically that would be the good spacing. I'm going to put this in at an angle and I'm going to do it basically like tent pegs. Okay, so that's one way to stake your tree. The other option is to put 2 stakes prevailing wind side, because when the wind comes in, you're going to end up having the tree blowing over in that direction and you want to try to keep it straight. So then we would use a stake this tall, and I'd have to go up closer to the trunk, and I do the exact same thing, the figure 8 with the Velcro straps. There's other methods as well. You can use hose wrapped around wire. There's all kinds of techniques that you can use. This is just something that I've come up with over the years that I find works, and it's cheap. So, and stakes, you know, that's basically 2 by 2, and you put a nice little sharp end at the end and then pound it in, and off you go. You're done. So that is, in a nutshell, how to plant a tree, step by step. We have it all written down on a sheet of paper for you, so if you forget anything, you can sit down and watch the video, and it'll help you try to figure things out and how to plant it. So, but ask us lots of questions when you do come by the store to pick out a tree.